All right, let's carry on now.
I can't get a hard on a remote mauler.
You're in business and you're still struggling without a salary. And without a salary, just a little drawing account to live on, and you're trying to market your product, and the rep deal you wiped out of the picture momentarily.
Well, in 1950, somewhere between 1950 and 55. Manufacturer of a good little amplifier called the Brook amplifier. Link Walsh was the instigator of that thing. I was at a hi-fi show with him in Chicago, and he introduced me to 5 of his reps. And they agreed to take on Klipsch and Associates, and we didn't have enough production or enough muscle in our advertising or enough whatever it took to keep those reps. One in San Francisco dropped out, and it was a very good thing. He was at penny waste. We had a darn good rep firm in southeastern United States, headquartered in Florida, but they dropped us because we just were too lightweight for them. Hootmacher in Chicago finally resigned. Anyway, we lost all 5 of them gradually, and the only man we had, there was a rep firm in Seattle. And it started out with a guy by the name of Rick Anderson, who carried my line into a firm that he joined, and then the firm fired him because he was completely irresponsible and almost dishonest. Well, never mind that. But the firm kept the line, Waddell Company, and as the patent folks say, MESNE, through main assignments. A guy by the name of Ray Johnston became he's been our oldest rep. He's been with us since about 53 or 4.
Yeah, so like 20 years. And Ray showed a 189% increase in his territory this year over last year, so he is still our best rep, not just our oldest. He's not doing it on the grandfather clause, he's working.
Yeah, well, aren't you going up? Your graph of your sales going up?
Significantly.
Yes.
This year we're averaging 37% above last year, and last year we were 50% above the year before, and it's been going like that for several years.
And if you don't think that's a strain on the purse strings, after all, a 50% increase in production or sales or something rather means 50% more income, and probably more than 50% increase in net income. But the income has to come a long time after you've bought the stuff to put into production.
If everything goes well, there's a 180-day lag to turn my dollar into a return dollar. And nothing ever goes well. You know, Sergeant Murphy lives here as he does everywhere else, so maybe it's 9 months, maybe it's 270 days. Because for one thing, the goods aren't going to get here on time. For another thing, something's going to go wrong a little bit in the back room. For a third thing, the dealer is not going to pay us on time. So, you know, if everything goes well, it's 6 months, but as Paul says, not many years come up to the average yet. So it's slower than that.
Well, now, would you have to increase your workforce? Workforce.
Well,
yeah.
when Bob came with us, how many men? We had 3.5 men in the back room, didn't we?
2.5.
We had 2 men sawing and sandpapering and painting boards, and another man half time back there and half of his time up in the front office buying things, acting job as purchasing agent, and management in general. Mm-hmm. And Bob came with us as a sales manager, and of course the foreman of the sales force should have a sales force under him. He was sales manager, and he asked for the job of being general manager, and I reluctantly let him have it, and he's built the damn company up into something that's pretty darn dynamic. Of the 30 employees we have, 25 of them are in the back room. 24.
How did you hear about Bob? Who recommended Bob to you?
Let's go back one stage earlier than that. Along about let's say in the early 50s, there was a fellow in Lafayette, Indiana, a dealer of ours, quite an effective one. As dealers went, he was probably, he bought more than most. Well, he decided, he left there and went to Boston for another enterprise, and in keeping with his hobby as an audio folks, he hunted around amongst the Boston area for a dealer, and found a fellow by the name of Bill Bell, who ran a little store called the Music Box, where they had some little hi-fi sets and components and things. The most expensive item in it was possibly $100. And he told Bill, I've got a system at home that'll make this stuff you got here in the store look awful sick. Bill says, show me. The result is that Bill became our dealer.
And has almost from that day to this been our #1 dealer.
Now that's in what state?
Wellesley, Massachusetts.
Wellesley.
Yeah.
Now, this particular party who sicked Bill onto us, sicked himself onto us too as a sales manager. And he came out here and spent a trifle less than a year, about 11 months with us, and dropped our sales from $117,000 in 1956 to about 60,000 in 1958. And the whole doggone thing was a mess. I don't know. The man has been successful before and since, but with us he didn't click. Well, I was about through with sales managers. And Bill Bell called me up one day and says, I got a sales manager for you. And I said, that's about the last thing I want. And then he and I corresponded, and I said, I can't afford you. And he said that...
that proves you need me. And he said,
Sure does.
Well,
and he said, that makes sense, let's talk. And so
we
did, and here
we
are.
looked at each other's crooked noses in Chicago at the one of the rep meetings up there, and he consented to fly home with me in our little puddle jumper. We looked the place over, and he said, I'll let you know. And his first wife says, if you go to Hope, Arkansas, I'll leave you. Well, he and she came to Hope, Arkansas.
I called her bluff and she didn't take the bait.
And, well, of course, darn it all, he came down here. I think he took about a 50% cut in income compared to his previous job. He's a venturesome person, if not a gambler. And, of course, well, I guess his last year's bonus was about twice his first year's salary here.
Now, can I interrupt you and ask Bob, why did you do that, Bob? Why did you take the sacrifice? Was this a challenging thing? Was the field particularly suited to your likes?
Of course, you're getting into a whole lot of motivational type things.
Yeah. Don't get too deep into that.
Which I don't think would be a particular interest to your readers.
Right.
But more nearly what happened was I wanted to have a job in which I could make big money, enlarge, be my own boss, and I refused to be part of what I call the corporate man. I didn't want to go to work in a blue serge or a gray flannel or an IBM uniform or something like that in order to do it. And I've always felt that the way to do that was to go ahead and take a chance with a smaller company in a product you could get involved with personally, and I can with Paul and the product, and as a result grow with this thing. And that's pretty much where it's been. We haven't stood on history or pretense. We've just taken what we had and tried to grow with it.
Now, have you got a little biography slip on both of you?
I probably have a pedigree. I know we have one on Paul.
Well, I'd like to know what your background is.
Nobody's usually interested in my pedigree.
Well, I'd like to have it because Paul Klipsch says that you've been successful in the job that you came here to do.
Well, he came here with well, let's see, he got his degree in business administration or something like that from the University of Illinois. He'd been to one of the other then smaller colleges in Illinois for his freshman, sophomore. It was after that you went in the military?
Yeah.
He's never been a second lieutenant. He jumped from corporal to first lieutenant in the field promotion.
No.
Anyway.
You guys have hit it off very well, I can see that. Now, where do you live around here? I ran into a nice little residential park over here.
That's where I lived during the war, but we had to get out of those quarters, and I've got a little old shanty downtown that...
You too. Live downtown?
I have had an apartment more recently since my divorce. I lost my house in the divorce and lived in an apartment for a couple of years, and I'm completing a house and have now slept in my new house 2 nights.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Where is it? Is it on this side of the
about 3 miles out of town.
3 miles east of town, back towards Little Rock. It's out in the country, in a pine thicket.
Good. You're getting your roots down, is that right?
Always have.
To me, it seems, I'm completely on the outside on this, but the product, there's just no comparison. I don't know a whole lot about audio, but I do read the magazines and things, and I've been into here, and I've got 3 sons, daughter. All 3 sons are buffs. And they've played around with it, and Klipsch horn is just at the very top, and the wave of hi-fi seems to me to be growing. I thought it died 3 or 4 times in the last 30 years, but it has come on stronger, it seems to me. What I'm saying is you just almost can write your own ticket. How big do you want to get if there's any...
Well, this is part of what Paul and I talked about, doing this thing our way, so we don't have to become part of a company that makes us wear an IBM uniform.
Right.
We've turned down several pretty lucrative offers. One guy I felt offered us more money than the company's worth, but in a way, Paul and I sitting in the other chair, and we're the seller, and of course we don't have to sell the darn thing if we don't want to. I say we, it's his company largely. I own a little piece of it, but it's his to buy or sell. And we're interviewing our potential boss. And on all 3 of the cases that I can recall, we decided we didn't want to go to work for that fellow. I'm his boss and he's my boss all at the same time. He's the president of the company and chief stockholder and chairman of the board, and I'm general manager. So in a way, at least 3-4 times a week, he owes me an explanation and I owe him one. And we scrap and fight like cats and dogs, and sometimes get...
acrimonious, I believe is the word.
I was going to say downright abusive, but we eventually get something decided. We're both kind of, not hotheads, but we're both strong-willed. Just strong-willed as hell, which is good.
Damn right it's good.
And we both go down different roads. I mean, he said a thing that got in my britches pretty good. I overheard a conversation. When I first came to work here, Paul and I shared an office. A little room, a little bit bigger than this, and I overheard him talking to one of his dealers. I don't know who it was. I probably know the man at this point. And he said, "Yeah, I finally became a whore. I hired a salesman." So that kind of let me know what he thought of the sales department. The better mousetrap theory didn't work, so we had to do something to save.
Well,
save the
that
company's
was my
paper.
attitude.
Well, it's working
10
now.
or 12 years ago.
Yeah.
But the thing is that he has educated me. Or maybe not educated me, at least kicked my ass informatively. And one of his favorite expressions is, nothing happens until somebody sells something. Well now, when he came here, we had some I suppose we had $2,000 or $3,000 worth of test equipment across the street. And that meant that we worked like hell to test the loudspeaker because, well, I believe it was a little bit before you came here, Bob, but we were doing the point-by-point response curve measurements.
So a response curve, which is a very necessary part of our educational process as we grow and make loudspeakers.
We can do about 2 a day.
Was a morning's job. Now we can do one in 30 seconds.
You mean on each speaker?
No, we
No,
don't. I'm talking about research work, development,
yeah.
Not
trying to
production.
improve the product. We don't have to run response as elaborate a test as a response curve on each loudspeaker. We have some production test procedure that I think is adequate for quality control. But when we're trying to accept a new mid-range driver, for example, we ring them out pretty doggone hard, and then try to keep our supplier's toes to the fire and keep him giving us the same quality he started out with. And there was a time when, with only one supplier, all we could do was just get on our knees and beg. Now we have 3 suppliers for our bass drivers. Or is it 4? 3.
3. And the point is, we have people competing for our business where we used to have to beg somebody to sell us something. We have a little muscle now in our purchasing department.
Well, getting back to the point, with the few hundreds of dollars worth of test equipment that we had in our research lab, research was a hard nut to crack. When we started making enough money to buy some things, we paid $2,000 for the most expensive cathode ray oscillograph we'd had up to that time was about $200 worth. We paid $2,000 for one. With a spectrum analyzer and some of the things. Well, that cracked the nut that we'd been working on, but we couldn't have done it without some income.
What I'd like to ask you now is the principle that you have the patents on. Is it altogether a corner horn,
No.
folded horn? What is it?
The original patent was a corner folded horn.
Yeah.
Now
that's a bass horn.
That was the bass
Yeah.
horn for the bass unit,
The
bass component for our
unit in
big
your
corner system.
combination.
But the real essence of our product quality isn't so much. After all, we made only corner speakers up until about 1952 or 3, somewhere along in there. As a matter of fact, it seemed about
57.
That you began making some of these.
Something other than a corner
yeah.
speaker.
Yeah, the bell and
but
the.
the thing is that after we while we're making only corner speakers, and after we branched out and started making speakers for general location, the secret of the product quality wasn't the fact that it was a corner horn speaker,
Right.
but that it was a high quality product all the way through. A horn, for example, has the advantage that its distortion is lower for a given output. If you take a piston and slosh it up and down in the middle of a lake, you can slosh water around and create a few waves, but you don't pump much water. Now, if you put a cylinder around that piston and then move the piston up and down, you can lift a column of water and raise it and pump it to some other place. You can do some work. You've raised the efficiency by, in the case of comparing the piston in the middle of a lake and the cylinder around it to a loudspeaker just sloshing the air of the room around and then putting a horn on the front of it. You've raised the efficiency by a factor of 10. You've reduced the distortion by a factor of 0.1. In other words, you've made the distortion about a tenth as great. And you've increased the power input capacity, and since the efficiency is greater, you've increased the power output capacity by a very large margin. For instance, if we take a certain well-known a bookshelf type speaker with a measured efficiency of around 0.03%. And our corner horn speaker, our La Scala theater speaker, and our Bell Klipsch speaker, they're all horn loaded all the way throughout their spectrum.
What do you mean by horn loading?
Well, like the piston with a cylinder around it. And the direct radiator, a piece of paper flopping around in the room.
Well, now, you have patents on that, right?
Let me finish.
Yeah, sure.
Here's this piston flopping around, but just sloshing the air. Now we put a horn in front of it, which is the equivalent of putting a cylinder around our piston. That increases our efficiency and it becomes a horn. Now, we take this 0.03%, 0.03% efficiency for the bookshelf speaker. Our horn speakers will run about 6 to 10% efficiency, or almost 200 times as much efficiency. That means that 200 watts into the little bookshelf speaker, an amplifier producing 200 watts and putting it into the bookshelf speaker, if it doesn't burn it up, would produce 1 acoustic watt output. We can get the 1 acoustic watt output with about 10 watts input, or less.
Have you got any technical papers that give that explanation on?
Yeah, we can give you more than lift.
Yeah,
We're
well,
almost in the printing business.
well, incidentally, I was going to ask you just for my information, if you have an advertising agency.
Yes, good little stuff in Shreveport, Louisiana.
This is an excellent brochure, I think. This is your.
Let me point out some of the things in that brochure.
Yeah.
That are simple explanations of things. Here's a little bit of. Here's some of the history of corner horn speakers. This was patented in 1934 by a fellow by the name of Sandeman of England and assigned to the Bell telephone system. Yeah. Here's our first corner horn of 1940, and here was the way we built it in 1946. Here's the principle of putting a speaker in a corner. You put a lamp in front of a mirror, and you've got you don't have any more total light, but in the region where you want to use it, you've got twice as much light. Yeah. All right, you put a horn in front of an acoustic mirror, and you've got twice as much sound pressure. The energy is the same, but the pressure is greater. All right, now in the case of a Klipsch horn in the corner, we've got 8 mirror images. That explains the corner principle. Now, I don't think we go into horns and why horns are better. But I've published 3 papers starting about 68 or 9 on modulation distortion. Now they're technical papers written at the engineering level.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to.
But the thing is that we show that a horn produces about, well, let's say 17 dB lower distortion than the bookshelf speaker I was talking about at a given sound pressure output.
And you still can get the benefit of the walls by putting those new speakers you're making, the Bell and the Scala, in a corner position.
Any speaker works better in a corner.
Yeah.
I want to get the 3 Mud 1, 2, 3 also. I was going to call Bell and ask her to get them for me. The Mud 1 and 2 are in the office, and Mud 3 is back in the shelf someplace, and I didn't see where she got it. Where is that?
And you're going to get me a little beyond sketch on you and him.
Is Bell up there?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I wonder. How do you...
Well, now there, I think I'll turn this over and we'll talk about some of your glamorous installations.
All right. Figure out how to use that picture as part of your write-up that you do it.
Yeah.
Now the way you
have you got an extra one of these sheets?
Yeah, I'll give you one. It's my shortest paper.
Yeah.
Now here's an 8-inch loudspeaker. Distortion is here's sound pressure output expressed in decibels in this direction. You'll have to relabel the curve because dBSPL means decibels sound pressure level. Now you can see that in going from this 8-inch speaker down to a 12-inch speaker, we've reduced the distortion by 1 square.
Yes.
Or, well, we reduced from 10% to 3%.
Are we talking about bass entirely now?
No, I'm talking
just
about distortion.
Sound.
The sound pressure, never mind whether it's bass or whatnot.
Right.
By just going, now then, here are two speakers operating at the same sound pressure level of 90 decibels. And here's 10% distortion, and here's 1% distortion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we take this better speaker here, and we go up here to 100 decibel sound pressure level. And at the same sound pressure level, Klipsch horn, instead of producing 10% distortion, is producing about 3%. About 3%. Well, of course, these are logarithmic units. We may have to redraw that thing for you so you can express it in units that people will understand. But anyway, you see you drop 17 decibels in going from a bookshelf speaker to a Klipsch horn.
Yeah, yeah.
And this speaker destroyed itself at that point. This one, we ran out of amplifier power. That's as high as we could go. Here, that was 179 watts. In the case of Klipsch horn, we terminated the experiment at 110 decibels because we got tired of listening at that sound pressure level, and it was only 13 watts.
And that was 10 more than busted this one, huh?
Well, this one busted up at, let me see now, relative performance, discussion, conclusion. Where was the curve 1? Peak power input was 57 watts, limit of the loudspeaker. This is 57 watts right there.
Mm-hmm.
Curve 2, peak power input was 179 watts. And curve 3, peak power output there was 13 watts.
Mm-hmm.
Now this 57 watts destroyed that speaker. 179 watts is the maximum power output of the amplifier, and here 13 watts, of course the darn amplifier just loafing along waiting for you to, we could run that thing up to here without any trouble at all. 131, yeah, we could run it up to
yeah,
there.
but you didn't need to, right?
Well, anyway, you can have a copy of this.
Yeah, I want to get a
paper.
copy of that.
And now let's see, you're going to talk about the glamour things.
Yeah, how'd you get into Radio City?
Well, we had a sales rep up there, a commercial sales rep, by the name of Al Rayburn.
I changed this to St. Mark's Episcopal Church.
Huh?
Yeah, the Bible.
Oh yeah. I'm
Episcopalian?
I'm a renegade. The story goes that the Salvation Army will pick a man up out of the gutter and turn him over to the Methodist Church, and they'll dry him out and get him a job. And after a while, he meets some nice folks over at the Presbyterian Church, and they invite him over there, and he finally joins over there. And after a while, he meets some white-collar folks over at the Episcopalian Church, and eventually goes over and joins them. And when they get through with him, he's ready for the gutter again. Well, I've gone almost full circle. I started my earliest church affiliation, as I recall it, in Indiana, was a Methodist, and then I was 30 years a Presbyterian. And just a couple of years ago, I joined the Episcopal Church, and I'm ready for the gutter again. Almost.
Well, you were looking for that fifth of Scottish ancestors to come in on the Episcopalian, weren't you?
Yeah. You know something? I wish people would cut these damn papers to a convenient
They don't have
length.
to be even. I can put them in here.
I'm gonna fix this thing so that it doesn't hang over the hangover.
Or is Klipsch still in Radio City?
Yeah. It's the first non-RCA loudspeakers to go in the place since it was built about 1935?
33, I think, Paul.
Somewhere close to the loop of the
Where did you
Depression.
put them in?
They were installed the
Couple of
winter of 69, 70.
Did you all engineer the whole operation, or did you just send some equipment up there and the engineers up there handled it?
Well, a little of both. The rep said, we're going to do this after the movie is over on a certain date, so you be there. So we got there. And here's this salesman character who brags that he doesn't know the difference between a decibel and a tweeter, but it was he who equalized the system with his own ear bones, and after they got the instruments on it, they didn't change it.
Who did he approach to get it in there? Is that pertinent, or he just got in touch with you all and said he had an opportunity to get Klipsch horns in Radio City?
This fellow he's a dealer. He's a commercial sound dealer, and his business is calling on people like Radio City Music Hall and selling them equipment. And he made an arrangement with them to do a series of loudspeaker auditions in which they knew they were going to need to replace a major part of their audio system for both live stage events and for motion pictures.
How about the organ?
The organ's a pipe organ.
Yeah, it has its own, doesn't it?
No,
it's an original sound generator. It doesn't use electric
pipe organs don't use
reproduction.
loudspeakers.
Yeah.
They use pipes.
Yeah, well, then they don't use any at all. I was going to use that in the lead because I think this is one of the most glamorous things to lead off with on Klipsch is the Radio City Music Hall installation. You just couldn't find a better spot for the top quality horn.
Yeah, it may be glamorous, but it boils down to plain old-fashioned hard work. Some poor devil had to go out and make a sales call and convince the people at Radio City Music Hall that his firm was capable. Then he had to set up some interviews and auditions and bring in loudspeakers for them to listen to, and eventually present them with our product, convincing them that it sounded right. Mostly dealing with their engineering staff.
Well,
nobody with a name that's recognizable to the public at all was involved in this level of decisions.
The glamour part I'm talking about, Bob, is that this immediately strikes a chord in the mind of almost everybody. Certainly everybody, audio buffs of all description, young and old, because Radio City Music Hall is the very tops. And here are Klipsch horns. And this is an endorsement of the quality, of the premier quality, it seems to me.
You know, it's a nice thing to talk about to the lay public, but when you're talking to the person,
engineers,
to the persons in the industry who are knowledgeable on the subject, they would be not impressed one single whit, because so much of this equipment is bought and sold on politics and brother-in-law activity, and who's got the best price.
You're talking about now the commercial end.
I certainly am. We could just as easily, if it not had been for somebody who did have the ability to hear, not been in Radio City Music Hall or in Robinson Auditorium in Little Rock, to go from one end of the spectrum to the other.